There's a voice in your head. It judges. It worries. It imagines futures that never happen and regrets pasts that no longer exist. You think that voice is you, but what if it's not? Pause. If you've ever found yourself spiraling in thoughts, replaying conversations, overanalyzing every choice, fearing what others think, ask yourself, who is watching all this unfold? Who is aware of the thinking? That awareness is not the thought itself. It's something else, something deeper, something older than words. And here's where it gets strange. Modern neuroscience confirms that thoughts arise before we consciously intend them. Electrodes light up in your brain moments before you decide to move, speak, or act. So who's really in charge? This realization is unsettling at first. If you are not your thoughts, what are you? Religions, mystics, and sages from all corners of the world have whispered the same truth in different tongues for thousands of years. You are the one who witnesses, not the content of the mind, but the open space in which all content appears and disappears. But few people stop long enough to notice. They drown in noise. They confuse thinking with being, and that confusion costs them everything: freedom, clarity, peace. But here's a question worth asking. If you were never taught to identify with your thoughts, how different would your life feel today? This exploration begins now, but you won't be told what to think. You'll be invited to look with fresh eyes and an open mind. And maybe, just maybe, you'll begin to sense a presence behind your thoughts that feels more like home than anything you've ever called me. If this made you pause for even a second, that pause is sacred. Hold on to it. And if you feel like someone else needs this, you know what to do. What if I told you the most powerful prison isn't made of bars or walls, but of beliefs you never questioned? Every single day, we wake up and resume a role we didn't consciously choose. We remember our name, our job, our failures, our future plans. And with that memory, we wrap ourselves in a familiar identity. But is that identity real? Or is it a story stitched together by thoughts? Science shows that up to 95% of our daily behavior is unconscious, automatic, patterned, rooted in beliefs we picked up from parents, media, school, many before we could even think critically. So if you react with anxiety, jealousy, fear, is that truly you? Or is it conditioning replaying itself like a program? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people live as passengers in their own minds. Thoughts arise, reactions follow, patterns repeat. They confuse the movement of thought with their own will, never realizing that most of what passes through the mind doesn't originate from conscious choice. It's as if they're living in a movie they didn't write, reciting lines they didn't choose, but they still think they're the director. And then something strange happens. You catch a thought, you notice it, you pause, and for a split second, you're not thinking, you're simply aware. In that gap, something timeless peeks through, something that doesn't rush, doesn't panic, doesn't cling. It's the you behind the thoughts, the you that watches but isn't disturbed, the you that's been there your whole life, quiet, consistent, aware. And once you taste that awareness, even briefly, something shifts. You can't go back to believing everything you think. So let me ask you, if you could separate who you are from what your mind constantly says, what kind of freedom would become possible? Feel that for a moment. And if that question stirred something in you, trust it. You're not alone in this remembering. And if you've ever felt like you were drowning in your own thoughts, others have too. You might be surprised who shows up if you say something below. Some thoughts shout, others whisper, but they all share one thing in common. They appear, and then they vanish. No thought stays forever. Even the ones that seem to haunt you eventually lose their edge until another one takes its place. So ask yourself, if a thought can vanish, can it really define who you are? Let's try something. Close your eyes. Notice the next thought that arises. Don't resist it, just see it. Then, notice the gap between that thought and the next. That space, silent, still, open. That's awareness, and it's always been there. But here's the catch. The mind doesn't like silence. It's addicted to commentary. It wants control, narrative, logic. So it keeps creating noise, stories of who you are, what you should fear, how others see you. Because the moment silence is recognized, the illusion of control begins to fade. And that's terrifying to the ego, because the ego isn't a villain. It's just a structure built for memory. It doesn't want to die. It wants to protect the image it has of you, even if that image is rooted in limitation, guilt, or shame. But you are not an image. You are not a memory. You are not a reaction. You are the one who notices all of it. That realization is where true liberation begins. You don't have to fight your thoughts. You don't have to fix them. You just have to stop identifying with them. You are not the storm. You are the sky it passes through. And the more you return to that knowing, the less power those thoughts hold over you. If that image landed for you, even a little, sit with it. And if you've ever caught yourself believing something your mind said, only to realize later it wasn't true, you're already further than most. Feel free to share one of those moments. You never know who else needs to see that they're not alone. Let me ask you something that might sound strange at first. When was the last time you actually chose what to think? Not reactively, not out of habit, but with full awareness? The truth is, most people don't think. They're being thought. A memory triggers a chain reaction. A notification sets off a spiral. A facial expression from someone across the room can ruin an entire day. But if thoughts arise without permission, why do we take them so seriously? Why do we suffer because of them? It's because we've been trained to identify with the voice in our head, as if it were an infallible narrator. But here's the twist. That voice contradicts itself constantly. One moment it says, "You're doing great." The next, "You're not enough." It judges others while secretly fearing their judgment. It sets impossible standards, then punishes you for failing them. So again, if that voice is unstable, reactive, and inconsistent, why call it me? Here's a radical idea. What if most of your suffering doesn't come from your life, but from your thoughts about your life? Think about it. The event happened. It passed. But the mental replay, that's what lingers. The inner monologue, the rumination, the what-ifs. They build a prison made of words. And yet, the door has always been open. Stepping out of it doesn't require fixing your mind. It just requires seeing it clearly. Like watching clouds pass through the sky, you observe without clinging. And when you do, something shifts. There's more space inside you, more silence between the noise, more freedom between the thoughts. If that idea gave you even a sliver of relief, let it settle. And if you know someone caught in the storm of overthinking, sharing this could be more powerful than you realize. What happens when you stop believing your thoughts, not suppressing them, not arguing with them, just letting them pass without attachment? At first, the mind panics. It loses the familiar grip it had over your emotions. It tries harder, more noise, more urgency, more what-ifs. But if you watch carefully, you'll see it clearly. Thoughts only have power when they're believed. Without your attention, they fade like echoes in an empty room. And in that space, between one thought dissolving and the next rising, something subtle but profound is revealed. Stillness. Not the kind of silence that's boring or blank, but the kind that feels alive, the kind that's been waiting underneath the mental chatter all along. You don't create this stillness. You return to it, because it's your natural state. It was there when you were a child, staring at clouds, lost in wonder. It's there now, beneath every scroll, every distraction, every burst of overthinking. And this stillness has a quality. It doesn't judge, it doesn't cling, it simply witnesses. From here, you begin to see things differently. A thought arises, I'm not good enough. But instead of tightening around it, you notice it. You say, ah, there you are again. And you let it pass. It loses its teeth. This is not detachment. It's clarity. And clarity is power. Imagine living a day where you respond, not react. Where your worth isn't dictated by your mood. Where inner peace is no longer a temporary visitor. It's home. If any part of you whispered, I want that, that whisper matters. And if you've ever touched that kind of inner quiet, even for a moment, drop a word or phrase in the comments. It may help someone else find their way back too. The mind loves solving problems, so much so that when there aren't any real problems, it invents them. It projects danger into the future. It replays mistakes from the past. It whispers, what if, again and again, until the body tenses and the breath shallows. But pause and look closely. Is the threat real? Or is it only happening in the theater of the mind? This is what most people never realize. The body responds to imagined stress as if it were real. A thought about failure can trigger the same chemical cascade as actual danger. Your pulse quickens, your stomach tightens, your muscles contract. But here's the twist. The only thing happening is a thought. And if you're unaware, you suffer, needlessly. But what happens when you bring awareness to the moment? When you recognize, this is just the mind spinning a story? Suddenly, a breath opens up. The muscles loosen. The panic fades. It doesn't mean the thought disappears. It just loses its grip. And that moment of noticing is everything. Because from there, you can respond instead of react. You can observe without merging. You become the calm center inside the storm of your mind. Most people never get that space. They don't even know it's possible. But you're seeing the edges now. You're glimpsing the difference between thinking and awareness. And that difference is the doorway to a radically different way of being. If you've ever noticed a moment where your whole state shifted just by becoming aware of a thought, share it. That shift is powerful, and you never know who else might need to hear your version of it. Have you ever sat in silence and suddenly realized how loud your mind is? Even in a quiet room, the internal noise can feel deafening. Endless monologues, imagined conversations, worries dressed as logic, criticisms masquerading as truth. But pause for a second and ask, if the voice in your head talks nonstop, and you're the one hearing it, then who's really in control? Here's something most people never question. You don't choose the next thought. It simply arrives. Try it. Right now, wait for your next thought. Don't reach for one. Just notice when it comes. That gap, that waiting, that's presence. It's the space before the noise. And in that space, something profound is revealed. You don't have to believe everything you think. That realization is like opening a window in a dark room. Suddenly, air rushes in, light floods through, the claustrophobia fades, and you realize most of the tension you carry isn't from life. It's from your mind's interpretation of life. But now that you're aware, you get to choose. Choose whether to follow the spiral or sit with the silence. Choose whether to identify with fear or return to awareness. Choose whether to judge the thought or just watch it pass. And each time you choose presence over pattern, the space inside you grows. So does the peace. And here's something beautiful. You're not doing this alone. Right now, someone else is watching this, maybe thousands of miles away, feeling the same inner pull towards stillness. If that's you, let someone else know. A single word in the comments might be the reminder they need. The journey isn't about silencing the mind. It's about remembering you're not its prisoner. Thoughts will still arise. The old narratives might visit again. The voice might whisper doubts, judgments, fears. But now, you see it. You don't confuse the noise with your identity anymore. You realize thoughts are clouds. You are the sky. And when you live from that knowing, life changes. Conversations feel lighter, decisions feel clearer, emotions move through you instead of getting stuck. You begin to trust the silence beneath the chaos. You stop clinging to every opinion the mind throws at you, and for the first time in a long time, you feel like you're living from the inside out. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. The awareness that's reading these words, that's you. Not the name, not the story, not the inner critic. Just awareness. Still, present, awake. And that's enough. So the next time your mind pulls you into a storm of overthinking, pause. Take a breath. Remember the truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the witness of them. And that changes everything. If this resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Someone out there is drowning in their own mind, not knowing they can float. A comment, a share, or a quiet, "I feel this," could be the thread that pulls them into the light.